We are the Quiggin Out MMA Podcast, episode 39. I know we're just cranking them out one by one, but I've got a very special guest. This is somebody I've been talking to, I'm pretty sure, since about 2011, 2012. The one and only Brian, the professional predator Rogers, because I'm just going to give you that full moniker because you deserve it. So how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the warm introduction. It's good to see you and hear you.
Absolutely. And I know we talked a little bit about, the last time we saw each other, we actually ran into each other in Cleveland right before Stipe's fight. So it's been a while. So I kind of want to talk through, since then, you haven't fought as much. Your last fight, 2017, you've got all those Bellator fights, the Strikeforce fights. And I really just want to go right into it because you posted something and you told me about it. And I was like, I want to hear more about this. So you called out Slamenko. So Tell me why.
I'm in a space where, I've been really focused in life, like on my business, advertising, marketing, as far as my career profession. And then just trying to do a lot of personal development work and just better myself and be a better human. I think the days of me being a professional MMA athlete are done. I got too many other things that I'm passionate about or into. But I still would like to fight. And people ask me, like, someone you want to fight, or do you wish you could have this match back or that match? I was fortunate to retire with 14 pro wins and 9 losses. And the only one that really bothers me is the Alexander Shlemenko fight. I just don't think a lot of him. I respect him as an athlete and a fighter. I don't think much of him as from a character perspective, from when he popped for testosterone or steroids years ago. And then, like I said, in the fight in 2011, I clearly won the first round. Second round was back and forth. And then he lashed out on my hair in the Muay Thai clinch and just kept kneeing me. I couldn't get my head out. I was just literally holding my hair. And he fucking knew it, And afterwards he apologized. And I always just look back at that fight like, oh, he snuck one past the goalie then. Because I wasn't out. The ref was Keith Peterson and he called it. And as soon as he stopped, I was like, yo, he's holding my hair. I can't get my head up. Shlemenko doesn't have much power too, which is also why, if I was still an active fighter and I probably wouldn't do bare knuckle, you know what I mean? Or if I was just finishing up, wouldn't be interested in doing bare knuckle. But due to the fact that to me, this is just about competition and fighting, I just want to fight this dude. Bare knuckle seems to make the most sense. That's really interesting. That's something I haven't competed in or done. Obviously, I haven't fought since 2017. I haven't fought in Bellator since 2016. But at the end of the day, you're always going to be a fighter. And there's a difference between a fighter and an athlete sometimes. And although I feel like I'm a former athlete who's always going to be a fighter. And now, the last couple of years, I've been fighting for people and brands and things like that I believe in. But I'm successful and happy about what direction that's going and everything. But I'm like, man, I'd like to fight that guy one more time.
And honestly, I've interviewed a lot of BKFC guys. And recently it's been because they're so receptive to doing the interviews because they're in that mindset where they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I'll be the first one to say, I was not a fan when I heard BKFC. I said, nah, I don't want any part of this. It's not for me. And I went to my first BKFC card that came to Tampa. And the first time I heard a bare knuckle hit a skull, I'm like, that is the worst sound I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I just went, and I remember going backstage and I saw, Julian Lane and Tom Schaff, and they had a war. And people are trying to fist bump them. And I'm looking at their hands, and they're swollen to 3 times the size. And I go, elbow, do something. And they're even looking at him like, really, dude? Now. But I've kind of fallen in love with it because it is something different, and some people can look at it as the end of your career and just trying something new. Or in your sense, like you said, you were an athlete before you were a fighter.
Yeah.
You've always had that passion, and you're holding on to something that's 10 years old now. I'm not saying that's a little crazy, but I love that because you don't get to see 10-year, kind of situations come up. And I think the last time something like that was even close was the Chris Weidman and Uriah Hall. I mean, they had fought, I want to say it was about 10 years ago. And we all saw how that happened. So it wasn't the greatest. But I love that you've been in the back of your mind. It's there.
That's the only fight I think about or have thought about consistently throughout my career. And generally, it's because I tell people all the time, like, I've never really had bad blood or animosity towards anyone in MMA. Like, to me, mixed combat sports, mixed martial arts, it's just high-speed chess. It's high-speed chess, and, you know everything that they're technically capable of. They have, for most cases, 2 arms, two fists, 2 elbows, legs, knees, all the same tools, but that rhythm, pattern, and cadence is what makes the sport, beautiful and violent, And as I think back to that, I just think about skill set, athletic ability, and where I was at. Well, I didn't win the fight. I lost the fight. It doesn't matter that he pulled my hair, this or that. But he knows he did it. I know he did it. And, he's a dude, like, I've never really been a any time, any place kind of guy. Like, people like to say that. I'm like, no, I want to train for 2-3 months.
No,
isolate myself and go insane getting ready for that peak competition. But as I look at a dude like that, like, I would fight that dude. He's an any place, anytime kind of guy, but I'd love to do it this fall. My energy feels best in football season, September, October. And, it's just a fist fight. So,
well, and you see that now, and you see, BKFC is kind of opening some doors that you wouldn't normally see. And the reason I bring that up is because we had Brian Maxwell on the show, and he's fighting Chad Ochocinco on Sunday. Which,
what?
Yeah, he's boxing him on the Mayweather-Paul card. Yeah.
Okay, it's boxing, not very.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's exhibition boxing. But the thing is, it's exposure. And one of the podcasts he was on, he had a shirt. They made him a shirt like hours after he was on the podcast, which to me sounds insane. Yeah. But they were able to make a shirt that said, "Who is Brian Maxwell?" Yeah. And I said, that's great. I said, because that opened a door. People see you on a slump and they go, oh, this is an easy fight. This is an easy match for him. And it really isn't. So I love that you want that fight. You want kind of like I don't want to call it a swan song, but we both know.
I have to get in another 10 years. I mean, there's certain people you don't like and think are good people.
It's one of those things where we know MMA doesn't have a contingency plan, and you have one of 3 options. You're a Ronda Rousey, you're a Conor, you're a John Jones, and you make a shit ton of money,
right,
to kind of carry you through what you want to do. Ronda going to WWE. I know her and Brock make way more than any UFC fighters do. Please,
yeah. You got to use the game. You can't let the game use you.
Yeah. And you have the route of, oh, shit, when I'm done fighting, what do I do? Or you have the route which you've taken, which is you've built up a brand, you've built up something you're passionate about, which I've loved to follow over these years because I'm always worried about fighters. I'm always worried about what happens after fighting because that mentality for sometimes is crippling mentally.
Yeah.
To be like, this is all I did. Now what do I do? So talk about life after fighting. I know we have the Shemenko thing on the shelf, but talk about life after fighting. Like, when did you decide, you know what, I need to further my career outside of the cage?
Well, for me, growing up in Kent, Ohio, my passion has always been helping people. As you know, when I started my career, I was a special education teacher, and my MMA career, that is. And I've always had a passion for helping people because I had good people around me. As I got more involved in, the world of mixed martial arts and business and things like that, I realized people in business that, can generate revenue and money and like that, those are the people that are able to affect change and do more good in the world, if they choose to. And so that's what really led me out of education. And, originally I started my career in software sales, and it was a software product. One called Zen Planner, one called 97 Display, 2 different companies I worked with for about 3 years. But I was doing a lot of consultative screen share owners with martial arts and fitness owners. I talked to former fighters sometimes. Actually, the day my son was born, I think I sold a website to Douglas Lima and their camp down in Atlanta. You know what I mean? Like, I was always working and running. But I guess I said that, that was kind of the entry breaker point. Like, I was selling websites and member management software for these 2 different companies, and martial arts people were always asking me about social media, brand, advertising, things of that nature. And so when I got done, actually I called Anthony Mazuka, who's a good friend of mine, former.
Oh yeah, I love Anthony.
Anthony's a great guy.
Yeah.
And I hit him up and was like, man, I'm thinking about social and, advertising and things like that. And then I had my last fight, in April of 2016, last Bellator fight in April of 2016 versus Alessio Sakara. That was April 2016. Didn't fight again until January of 2017, and then January of 2017, March of 2017. And in that second fight, I tore my labrum and my rotator cuff. At the time, the UFC was like, hey, win 3 in a row and we'll sign you. And I had 2 and then tore my shoulder. And so I did rehab in PRK. As police concerned, yeah. But at the time, also, I was like, you know what? This is how I'll have more time to train and focus. I'll start my own agency because that'll give me so much time, which is laughing. You know what I mean? That's very naive of me. When you own your own business, it consumes you for the most part. So did that for about 3+ years and whatnot, and then me and my business partner separated, and then I started working in the world of advertising with different agencies and kind of started a new agency and started rebranded, and then I've worked with other companies on the agency side as well. And it's been a road though, because you have the challenge of leaving what you've known in mixed martial arts, and being that's your identity, that's what you do, that's what people know you for. Every time someone sees you, they go, when's your next fight? Mm-hmm. And that's gone, and even your somewhat friends can become fair weather fans, because you're not that dude anymore, per se, whether it's them rooting you on or being friends with you or whatever, that can change at times. So for me, I really left the gym. Like it took me about 2.5, 3 years from 2017 till about 2019 to really work out again. Wow. Just was really focused on business. And then also I didn't realize I was dealing with depression and putting all my energy into the business and things of that nature. And, life changes, pivots and things like that. And I guess I'm saying people look at me as a, successful and fortunate, and I'm blessed and I am that, but I've had a lot of ups and downs over the last couple of years to get where I want to in marketing and advertising. And it's interesting, even as, a well-educated person, when I talk to people sometimes in business, they very much still see me as just a fighter, and no more than that. And so it always makes me think about other people and guys, because I have the ability to communicate and connect at a fairly high level. And as you know, from interviewing tons of athletes, not everybody can do that.
No.
And then those communication skills have got me in the door a lot of places where I've been able to then learn and grow more and things like that. But very often, a lot of guys, they're not going to get their foot in the door because they're going to get prejudged on something they could likely do and handle, So it's interesting. I think we've obviously seen this in other sports with like football, especially in CTE and MMA, but I think it has a lot to do with concussions. Concussions have a lot to do with depression and things like that down the road. So I think it's dual tough, changing your sport and then trying to find your place in the world. Like I really identify a lot with even friends of mine that have fought in the military and armed services, and when they get done, they're like, this isn't normal. Like, where do I go?
Like, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, and I don't feel like this is like the world doesn't have a place for them per se. So, yeah.
And I love that you touched on everything that you just did, because I remember the first time we talked and just your articulation and telling me about, working with special education. It's not something you hear with everybody. You hear the Rich Franklin, being a math teacher, from Ohio. I had to throw in the Rich Franklin, of course. But Rich, if you ever want to be on the show, come on.
Yeah, my buddy Chris Mearswack, who's a former training partner of mine, Strikeforce vet. He used to train with Rich. He was actually Chuck Liddell when Rich was training for the Rich and Chuck fight back in the day. And Chris actually moved out
115, baby. 115. Yeah. But I just remember the articulation that came from you. And I was just starting out interviewing fighters and not really understanding how much was really behind that fighter. And like you said, people still look at you and they go, oh, you're a fighter. I still remember you, the Bellator 62, Vitor Viana. Like, I'll never forget that flying knee. Like, that's one of the top 3 I think I've ever seen.
I appreciate that.
But I've also seen you, like you said, I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows. And I love that you kind of put that out there for everybody to see. And I love that you just talked about depression, because I feel like we dive into a business, our work, our life, and we don't see what effect it's having on us, or we feel like, well, I'm done fighting. That's my life is over.
Yeah.
So, what was it like to overcome that and really say, I've got a place in advertising. I've got a place in this where I am passionate about helping other people.
It's one of those things where like I've never wanted to be like anybody else. Believe it or not, I'm kind of a rebel. People don't think that because of my education or background, but I'm pretty stubborn. I really believe in the things that I believe in, and a lot of things of that nature. And so for me, it was like wanting to get in that space because I worked with a lot of people in, business development and marketing, advertising. Honestly, I thought they did a bad job sometimes, and as I think it's just not a lot of creativity sometimes out there. And then also that world of advertising is not very diverse. There's not a ton of minorities and representation. And I've never wanted to be a stereotype in any way, shape, or form. And I've wanted to open and or kick doors down for opportunities for myself and other people I believe in. So that was a big passion and driver behind it, But it's funny, I was working out the other day and I wrote on the dry erase board. I got into marketing and advertising to tell stories and help people more than anything, and the stories can go a lot of different ways as far as that goes, but it could be informing them, educating them, it could be selling them a product that brings, happiness and gratitude. It could be a lot of different things. But that's why I'm mostly passionate about it, is the opportunity to help. And obviously, clearly, advertising and marketing can have a very much of a dark side. But I'm working with some cool agencies and brands, my own agency, and then Hey Mr. Media, and here in Denver, along with Cactus Marketing Group, who both do amazing work with small business and some of the biggest brands in the world. So I work with good people, which is nice as well.
And I feel like you're the kind of person who would never work in a situation. And I think part of your education background and part of your fighting background, you never work with somebody who's going to compromise your morals, your beliefs in that. Yeah. And regardless of pay, you're not the kind of person to say, you know what, I'm just going to let that go. And I've always respected that about you because, like you said, you don't want to be the stereotype, but you also want to kick down those doors. And I'm going to use the example, you're going to flying knee down those doors just because it's there.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a big part of my gift and purpose is the ability to instill confidence in people and even myself. And I think the reason I feel like I can be outspoken is because it's my truth. It's honesty, it's transparent, and I feel like that's the way to communicate. I'm a big believer in radical candor. Really, really big believer in that, and speaking your truth, and you can do that with empathy, for other people's situations and things like that. But I believe you cut out a lot of BS, for lack of a better word, when you can do that with presence and empathy around it. So,
yeah, and that's exactly what it is. Too many people are not willing to go for that dream, go for that passion because they're afraid of what's going to happen, and especially with fighters, because like you said, that was your life. That's who people know. Even your friends have turned into fair weather fans. And I think that was a really revolutionary statement. And it's sad because they're like, oh, I'm friends with Brian, the MMA fighter. And now they're like, hey, I'm friends with Brian, the ad guy. Like, and it's not to discredit you, but again, you're absolutely right. You kind of see what kind of people are surrounding you and what kind of company you keep at that point.
Yeah, you see what type of energy it is. It's funny living in Colorado. Like I've been in Denver now 7 years, and having not fought since 2017. Like a lot of friends of mine don't. It kind of comes out that I fight, or used to fight, but a lot of people have no idea. Like shout out to my buddy Josh at Lux Mobile Detail, Pure Detail in Minnesota. We've been friends for like 2 years, and he called me one day. He was like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "What are you so excited?"
Like, what's wrong?
And one of his friends or employees was like, was saying he was into MMA. And he's like, oh, my buddy Brian fought for Bellator or something. And then like the dude lost his shit and started pulling up clips. And that's when my buddy Josh called me and stuff. So it's funny. Like that's one of my best friends who, didn't know. Didn't know, or at least not that. I tell people this though. I think fighting is a gift I had, or a skill set and ability I had, something I was passionate about because of the skills and gifts I was blessed with. But like, that doesn't make me a better person or more important than anybody or really even that much more special. You know, it's an interesting choice in hobbies and passions and things of that nature. But I think a lot of people have a lot of grit and grind in a lot of other similar but different ways as well.
Yeah, and I think most people just don't find that grit and grind until it's too late. You know, they think, oh, I'm 35, 36, 37. I can't do any of that stuff. And you're seeing a lot more fighters with a little bit more longevity when it comes to that. And I'm going to use Verdum just because he always comes to mind. I mean, the man's 43.
Yeah.
43-year-olds should not still be fighting. But he can, and he's doing well. We're not going to talk. You know, we won't talk about that last fight, but that dude tapped. I'm sorry. Doing jiu-jitsu, if I even like tap you on accident, I will own that. I will own it because I went, okay, I shouldn't have tapped instead of pushed. So I get that. But so many people just don't take that leap. They think, oh, it's too late. I can't do that, you know. But at the same time, like you said, I'm no different than anybody else.
Right.
My past doesn't make me any more special than I am today. It's what I'm doing in the present. And that philosophy you carry, I'm just feeding off of everything you're saying. So I'm loving this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's I think it gives something like, when I mention it, something like business or interviews, like it tells you a little bit about a person. Like you don't, if you're going to be successful, you're not an overnight success in MMA. There's a lot of work and grind and process around that. And then when I always speak to people about problem solving in business or just the way I approach things, it's funny. My best skill set as a marketer is strategy and planning. I don't think that skill set as a marketer. Not at all. But it's process, performance, outcome in terms of goal setting. Like I tell people, you want to be in MMA, you want to be world champ. Okay, you're gonna have to be able to fight 5-minute rounds. Okay, that's 25 minutes. All right. So what do we have to do to be able to fight 5-5s? Okay, we got to have good nutrition year round. You know, you can't have a bad weight cut. Okay, we need strength and conditioning, so we're doing that. Okay. So, all right, I got to get a nutritionist. I got to hit weights consistently. I got to go to the grocery store consistently. I got to meal prep. When am I going to do that around my other days, times, and responsibilities? And that's what you have to fit into your process and make those habits. And when you start to do those things, those habits, and putting, you know, the meal prep in your process, the extra stretching, the strength and conditioning or whatever, all of a sudden you start having a better performance in practice, you know? And when you're able to do that day in, day out because you feel better, because you're in shape and you have better strength and conditioning, your performance goes up in practice, which is generally a better outcome when it hits cage time. And I think it's really the same a lot in business when people realize. Like, it was funny. I was interviewing with a software company. I'll probably put this on LinkedIn. I was interviewing with a high-level software company, and we had some trouble. We had some friction with the phone call. And she's like, "Hey, just call me." I was like, "No problem." She's like, "And I'm going to jump off a video." And as soon as she jumped off, knew she was going off a video, I was like, she's not going to be present, and she's going to pack this interview in. And she might have been taking notes while we were doing it, but I heard her clicking and things like that, telling my story. She's asking about skill sets and things of that nature. And like I said, I've sold software before for about 3 years. And she was challenging me, like, well, what makes you think, like, what are some of your skills and this and that for the opportunity? And so I was speaking to it and saying, hey, my best hard skills that I have the best soft skills. That's it. You know, consultative salesperson, like to solve problems, not interested in convincing anyone of anything, but I will highly educate you and give you information so you can arrive at that.
Yeah.
But the person, the interviewer said, the interviewer, the person at this company said, I'd like to see, you know, you just don't have as much achievement and winning of success that I'd like to see for this role. And I'm like, and also, let's say this, it's a software product. There's one solution. People are coming to them for one thing, basically, with their particular product. Being in advertising and marketing, there's a range of products. Do you need brand strategy? Do you need some brand therapy? Do you need a rebrand? Do you need digital marketing? Do you need Facebook? You know, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I need sales. Like, no, you don't need, you need a brand before you get the sales, or you need activation. You need blah, blah, blah. There's a million things. And so I was like, I've been selling a way harder product, which is like understanding the problem first, figuring out the solution, with art, creative, math, whatever it may be. And so when she said, like, you haven't achieved enough, but I was like, one, like, it's a software product. There's nothing creative about this. It's not tough. Yeah. And then secondly, it was like achievement. I was like, my whole life's a walking. Like in my head, I'm like, my whole life's an achievement. And I've probably worked harder. Like I've ate the same thing for 3 months at the same day on the same time for 3 months to make weight. And you're telling me I can't develop my sales process to get better? You're telling me that your other salespeople have done anything that crazy and wild? So, you know, that can get interesting sometimes in business. Some people will see your skill sets and understand the type of human you are and the things you've done and say, like, okay, now when we put you in this situation, this is how you're going to excel. And other people are more blinders, and those are the people I tend not to be able to work with.
Well, and you see that so many times where you apply for an entry-level position and they want 10 years of experience, and you're like, what? Why? Why do you want someone that experience for an entry-level position that's going to be, quite frankly, an insult to their financial and, you know, emotional and everything about them that you really – so it's crazy that somebody could say that. Like you said, she turned off the video. She's probably over here.
Yeah. Here. So what are we doing here? And then, like, I also have a problem with that too. It's like I don't really want to hear about your company's diversity, inclusion efforts and all of that when I haven't experienced like that. And then you're also telling me that I haven't achieved enough when I'm, you know, and like I said, I don't think I'm that special, but if you want to run some statistics, there's not a ton of African-American males that are even capable to apply for that job, have the master's degree or have the experience. When you're telling me I don't have enough achievement, I'm like, who and what do you want? And then where's your company really being diverse? You know, so it's interesting in that regard sometimes.
And that's a perfect segue into talking about the education of fighters. You know, we've heard it so much over the years. You've got fighters who aren't dumb, but they just say dumb things. Yeah. Let's just be honest. But you've got the education background. So talk a little bit about your education background. Yeah. How you went from that to fighting to what you're doing now, and how you've carried each aspect of everything you've done before into who you are today.
Appreciate that. So like I said, growing up in Kent, Ohio, and besides my parents, my teachers and coaches were my biggest role models, the people who both supported me. Teachers, coaches, athletic trainers, people of that nature. And like I said, when I started out in undergrad, I saw friends that had mild, moderate learning disabilities or maybe didn't come from the best home life, were coming up short or not living to their true potential. And so for me, I was like, okay, I want to be in a space where I can help those people, you know. So I studied education at Walsh University. Started out as a phys ed major and then quickly pivoted into special education. Wanted to work with people that had mild, moderate learning disabilities and whatnot. But I got out of Walsh in 4 years of my undergrad, but I actually skipped doing my final thing of student teaching and getting licensed because I took an opportunity to get a graduate assistant to get my master's and take a graduate assistant opportunity at the University of Akron. Was a Division I strength and conditioning coach working with the Zips. Eventually got my master's in sports science, the emphasis in coaching and leadership. And that was great. You know, I was coaching athletes in the weight room, you know, D1 solid athletes, men and women's basketball, football. They have athletes in track, swimmers, rifle. You know, I had a mix of everything. And that was great. And I had baseball. Like I actually started to like the other Olympic sports way more than I did working with football and basketball because they just kind of had a different perspective and more humility, frankly, and whatnot. But during, you know, that time, this is going into grad school, 2006, I had my very first pro fight on BET on the very short-lived Iron Ring show in February of 2008, where we had John the Rapper was in my corner and whatnot. But actually that happened while I was in grad school. And it was interesting meeting those Viacom execs, the guy Campbell McLaren, I forget, who runs Combati. He was one of the people. Combate. Yeah. He was the person helping produce him and David Isaac, who produced the first UFC, did the Iron Ring show on BET. And that's one of my first kind of forays into advertising and marketing and production and understanding kind of the business behind the business, if you will. And funny enough, my matchmaker Mike Camp, who was my manager at the time, he called me. It's like this is 08, no 07 maybe. I had just finished my last amateur fight in August of 2007. I was at a Linkin Park concert, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, you think you can be in?" Yes, yeah. He's like, "You think you can be in Atlanta on Monday?" And I was like, "For what?" He's like, "There's this new." He's like, "BET's doing an Ultimate Fighter." Like, what? He's like, "Yeah, BET's doing an Ultimate Fighter. Can you be in Atlanta on Monday?" I was like, "All right, So my friend, shout out to my buddy Mario, the Diamond Royale. I think he bought my ticket, to help get me down there. And when I got there, it wasn't a training camp. It was a fight. It was you fought one round, and if you won, you got on the show. You didn't know how much money you were gonna make. And then Floyd Mayweather was there. John was there. And it was wild. It was at a gym in Atlanta. I forget the name of it. But it was pretty popular at the time. And they only had heavyweight, 185 and 155 for the show. And that was like 210, 215. And that was actually what made me go to 85 originally. As an amateur, I fought only 205. And then that pro fight to be on BET, went from 220 to 185 in a fairly short time.
Oof.
But yeah,
I'll take that weight cut. If you want to make me 185, let's do it.
We'll get you hooked up.
I got a long way to go to 185. I'll take 195. I'll take 195.
There you go. I believe it.
It's crazy because, like you said, 2008, MMA was in a weird shift. The Ultimate Fighter had been a couple of years prior to that. We were kind of seeing what was going on, how that was going. And then, 2010, you fought like 4 times, 3 or 4 times. Like, insanity. And you had you had your first loss, which some guys, when they have their first loss, they just don't recover from that.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, that's it. And I'm like, you went 1-2 in your first 3 fights. And then your next loss was 7 fights later against Flamenco, which, again, hold the hair. Like,
yeah, it was a streak where I think I came into MMA at a good time, in the sense of where the sport was, and how it was growing and developing. I was a better athlete than most of the people I fought, but I think sometimes I relied on my athletic ability too much, or also fought typically like I got shot out of a cannon and was trying to, get out of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're a little intense.
Yeah, like I said, I was looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I do strategy now. Like, there was not a lot of strategy sometimes when I fought,
Punch, kick.
Yeah. Hit him more than he hits you.
Yeah, right.
I think I came to the sport at a good time where the sport was growing. They had figured out the entertainment. They were starting to build individual fighters' brands and, support them in that way. So I was fortunate and also worked hard, took advantage of the opportunities, but fortunate as well.
Yeah, and I like to talk about, Bellator has always done a good job, and people can give them shit all day long for signing a bunch of UFC guys after the fact, but they always like to try and build up their own. Guys like you, Chandler, Alvarez, Rickles, those are the guys I think of when I think of Bellator and when they were really building it up. And it's kind of sad because none of those people, are still there.
Rickles might be the only person there. I feel like they've invested well in Douglas Lima.
Yeah, Douglas Lima.
Yeah, Rickles and Lima are like some of the only old school guys.
Yeah.
There.
And I'll bring up somebody else, but there's been some recent legal trouble, so I'm just not going to mention him.
Okay. Text me on that. I'm wondering who that is.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where it's somebody I've known for a long time, and it just kind of went off the deep end, and it sucks.
Well, what's interesting going back is like you never know what's going on in someone's life.
Yeah,
and people don't understand like mental health. Not this is depression, but when sometimes you think you're yourself and you might be in a manic spin, and we can pivot off the subject and respect your friends' privacy and whatnot. But like people don't realize that like those chemical imbalances are what lead to things happening.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody looks at it as an excuse. They don't excuse that kind of behavior, but we need to identify the same reason. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. Like,
okay,
I have an understanding. Like, I don't use it, but I say I don't use it. But at the same time, like interviewing fighters, talking to people in general, you're psychoanalyzing in one way or another. You're trying to figure out how can I help them? What is my role in their success story? What is my role? And you start to take on some of their demons. And I really feel that's one of the hardest things. And that's just the mental side of it. That has nothing to do with the physical side. When you're getting punched, kicked, kneed in the face, in the head, and it's rewiring your brain.
100%. People don't realize like there's certain, there's we talk about it from an athletic competition standpoint. Sometimes go, oh, that fight changed him and he wasn't the same after that, And I think it's just because it's this loss and he had like an emotional down because he lost the belt or he lost that. And it's like, no, he got his brain scrambled. Okay. Yep. And then like 50% of his income was cut, and then since he had his brain scrambled, he was probably into a depressive state. He probably, the reason that person probably got divorced is because him and their partner don't get along, don't see themselves the same. She or he, could be either way, wants to move their life in a different direction, or, hey, maybe she starts to do this and you're trying to hold on to that. Now your skills are diminishing. Your mental assets, facilities could be, your skill set. There's just a lot of things that also are happening at the same time in life. Like, it's hard to be an active, high-level fighter and also have a normal, balanced family life. Like, it doesn't really go hand in hand. And it's tough on the fighter and the family. And then also, if those aren't engaged and in sync together, it's even more tough. But, like, those are the other elements people don't realize that happen in an athlete's career and things like that. It's like they're still dealing with normal life like everyone else, you know what I mean? And their ages and their time and all of that. But their emotions, the way they think, are different anyway. And then now imagine that's being flipped and reprogrammed.
Yeah, and it's being accelerated is really what it's doing. And I'm just going to use the most recent example that we've all seen, and it's the Diego Sanchez story, because some of that shit was crazy.
Yeah.
Like, listening to what he would say and the phone calls are released, like the back and forth between those two. And it showed you, and this is no disrespect to Diego, I don't agree with some of the choices he made, but I feel like his altered mental state because of fighting and taking as much damage as he has taken over almost the last 20 years.
These guys never been knocked out, right? Maybe once.
I think maybe once, but I mean,
just taking shots.
Yeah. All right, guys. Somebody's gonna call me out on this, so I'm gonna look it up. So
I don't think he's been. I don't
think he's been straight up finished. As far as I can think of, when he fought BJ Penn, he had the stoppage because that cut was nasty.
Yeah.
I think that was, for me, that was one of the first cuts I had seen in MMA, because I didn't start watching live fights until UFC 102.
Okay.
But I had fallen in love. So he got knocked out by Matt Brown.
Okay.
Ali Quinta. He had the Joe Lozon. And I remember the Matt Brown one.
TKOs? Okay.
The Matt Brown one was nasty, but up until that point,
it's a lot of damage. I'm saying it's a lot. He's a guy who could sometimes, the idea that some guys are too tough for their own good
is way too accurate for MMA.
Yeah. Yep.
And
it's
so
interesting too how that'll continue to play out, because I know people who have had, a lot of people have ups and downs with their mental health, but there's the effort of knowing you're struggling, and some people don't know that they're struggling,
or they're not willing to accept it.
And sometimes you don't know because you're manic or you're in your whatever. But like with a guy like Diego, like I wonder, like, you don't know what's going on in people's lives, and this can get weird fast. Life can get weird fast. And
I will say, in MMA, that's up there with Mayhem Miller going apeshit a few years ago. Warhammer, I'm pretty sure Warhammer's still in prison. So
yeah. I mean, people kind of forget about even the late Evan Tanner.
Yeah.
A dude just got on a motorcycle with not much water and just drove in the desert And it's interesting that that's the way he ultimately passed. I know they kind of ruled it a suicide, but like, it's really not that much different than walking down to the cage. and going like, I'm going to make this walk. Can I go do this? Can I climb this mountain? What's going to happen? Like most guys in MMA, like, and people I know are wired, like, you don't feel alive unless you're chasing death.
Well, and you look at, his fight with Tito when he got slammed, and you're like, oh my God, it almost killed him. There's very few fights where you see a slam like that, and that's gotta be something in your mind that's just kind of lingered. And like you said, there was clearly some underlying issues that were either present before fighting. And I've even heard some fighters say, we have to be crazy to go in there. Like nobody's sane to be like, you know what? I want to get beat up for $300 and a bar tab.
There, if you choose this life, you are a different kind of human. And doesn't mean special, doesn't mean good, doesn't mean bad. It's just a little different, to make those choices. And it's interesting because at some point you're fighting something. You're fighting something inside that makes you reverse engineer it and want to do it outside, you know? And when those friction in life and other things start to become tough, and then you don't have the MMA,
you're
I have a friend of mine, it's just funny, actually reminded me of somebody who reached out to me recently and said they weren't doing well and they weren't training anymore. And I've reached out to them to work out or like meet up a little bit, but I need to follow up because like, although I sent a couple texts back, I was kind of having a real reflection moment at this time. Like I need to hit him up because stuff can go left for people. You never know what people are dealing with or struggling with.
And you never know that conversation you're having with them, that reaching out moment, how it's going to change them. And I'll bring up, like you said, not naming any names, but I've got a friend who is posting a lot of stuff and you're like, oh, it's funny. And then you realize that there is an underlying cry for help. There is an underlying, we need to reach out. And, luckily for me, he happened to be in town this past weekend and I made every effort I could to see him. And not be like, hey, man, I saw your stuff. It's kind of worrisome.
Yeah.
Just to be there to be like, hey, I'm here. And
I'm glad you said that too. It's like, it's funny. I think very often people look at other people's social media with different lenses. And I think people need to do a better job of asking, hey, what's that mean? Or what does that mean to you? That holds the person posting more accountable to it. And also, like you said, it could be a cry for help. It could be for them to open up, but I think sometimes people don't understand why people are doing certain things or the ramifications around.
No. And it wasn't, I didn't, even having the degree, I was kind of brushing it off. And then you really take that further look to go, something is wrong here. And it's kind of like when you start to see people posting constant negative things about themselves, self-deprecating, like that kind of situations. Like we as people need to, we as human beings need to look and just be like, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like just letting that person know, hey, listen, you don't have to tell me what's going on. Just know I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And like you said, reaching out to that friend who was, reached out to you, you don't know what that conversation is going to do for them, for their life.
Yeah.
And if something happens to them, which I hope this is not the situation, but you're going to think in the back of your mind, should I have done something different?
You always hear that story. Everyone, we always know everyone's got shit,
Yeah.
But whenever something like that tends to happen, you hear that, you hear that from people. And that's internal, there's a lot there, but you can, do what you can.
Yeah. And I love that this took a wide left turn in the mental health aspect, but we ignore that. We ignore a lot of that, especially in fighting, because again, there was a, I don't know that this ever came out. I think it did. There was a Real Sports episode that they did with psilocybin and ayahuasca, and Ian McCall was in it. There was a former NHL player, and they talked about, one of those moments in that documentary really stuck with me. And it really, even never being a fighter, even never being in a fight, you can understand that he was so depressed from not being the person he used to be.
Yeah.
That at one point he says, I used to look at the rafters and I wonder if I could hang from them.
Yeah.
and, you know, talking about the rewiring of the brain. And it's something we need to look into. And any promoter, any person who is putting on a fight needs to focus on the well-being of the fighter after that, because that fighter has given everything to you. They've given up health, they've given up time, they've given up money. You know, there's fighters that have given up careers so they could fight, but what's left for them afterwards? So you see, yeah,
not a lot. There's the game is the game. Like I said, you got to, Marcus Marinelli, head coach, my first head coach at Strong Style MMA, always said, Brian, said, you got to use the game. Like, can't let the game use you. But that's tough because, fighters don't get paid great still. You know what I mean? I don't know what UFC league minimum is now even, but it's not great.
No. It's not enough to make you quit your full-time job.
No, it's a weird sport where, like, you got to hope you hit. Everybody gets in their bag at different times. You know what I mean? And hits their hot and cold streaks. And for some guys, that maxes out. Like, they get in the UFC, they might lose 2 or 3 in a row, or they might go up and down. Or you get Charles Oliveira, who's up and down and hit the streak late, and then now he's getting his bread late. But those
he's
are
only like 31. Like, it's still insane to think he's only like 30 years old, 31. And I'm like, you think about how long that guy has been in the UFC and the people he has fought. But you're absolutely right. And I love that you brought up Oliveira, because that win against Chandler will go down. People will be talking about that for years.
And I wonder, like, now, obviously he's a champ, so now he's going to make that extra money, but I'm like, anybody, he's one of the best paid guys. He's been around forever. Gieson Tabao, staying power. I mean,
wow, man.
I think he's still fighting, but the fact, he was in the UFC for so long. You know what I mean? Like, so long. And he never hit that world title, but like Oliveira in a different way, kind of similar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and T-Bow just fought April 29th for PFL.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this dude's got he's got 50 fights.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's, he's beaten Will Brooks, Efren Escanero. He had his four fight losing streak, but he lost to Ferguson, Makiavov, Trujillo. Somebody's going to kill me for the pronunciation of his name, but Desmond Green.
Yeah.
But he's beating guys like Norman Park, Hallman, Healy, Jamie Varner, Francisco Trinaldo, like Dos Anjos. He's fought the who of the who, and he's been fighting since December of 1999.
It's wild.
Like 22 years of fights, and 50 fights. We're looking at almost 2 fights a year, easily, consistently. And he had the break between 2019 and 2021. And he went for the PFL route.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I wonder, and I haven't followed his career, but 2019, you said break till 2021. I wonder what was going on in his life. I don't know if he was injured or that was public.
Let's see if Wikipedia tells us what's going on.
Like, I'm going to retire. Because, like, in MMA, they say, like, I love the Chael Sonnen quote. He's like, you don't retire from MMA unless you win a world title. You just quit. But then sometimes I think, I love that line because it's the truth. But it makes you wonder, when guys retire, not just talk about, when guys, like, really retire and they come back in, there's turmoil going on.
Yeah, there's either financial turmoil, there's some sort of emotional turmoil, or there's just that one guy that they were sitting at the bar with who was like, didn't you used to fight? You were pretty good. Yeah. And you're just like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, I was. You look at what fighters have had to go through over this last year and a half, dealing with COVID. And honestly, I'm always going to give Combat Night a shout out in Jacksonville, Florida, because they were the first promotion. People say the UFC was, but they opened the doors to show the UFC that Florida could host an MMA event.
Yeah.
They did an event in March.
Wow. March 2020?
March 2020, they had an event, And then the UFC comes to Jacksonville for the first time a couple months later. And I'm like, well, that wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
And I remember I had the promoter on, Mitchell Chamale, and I love Mitchell because Mitchell just fought and won last month, the month before that.
Mm-hmm.
He went as a cornerman. And he gets to Singapore, and they're like, hey, anybody able to fight? And he goes, I haven't fought in 5 years. And they go, you want to fight? And he goes, yeah, sure. Like, that to me shows what this sport is. Yeah. This sport is not something that's going to be stopped by anything. MMA has dealt with governors. They've dealt with legislations. They've dealt with, I think it was, I want to say Eduardo Dantes at one point couldn't fight at the Mohegan, like one of the arenas, because he wasn't 21 years old.
Yeah.
Like, and just, we've overcome everything to make this happen. And it's the craziest sport that this is what survived. This is what has been constantly putting on shows because they looked outside the box. They said, we can do this without fans. And we were garnered with a new experience. We were garnered with an experience where you can hear your opponent's coach saying things.
Yeah.
You can hear your coach saying things. Yeah.
It's the gym. It's like the gym.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll never forget, I interviewed Mike Pyle years ago. And Mike Pyle, I have the highest respect for, just because during an interview, no lie, he was in a Home Depot parking lot. Mm-hmm. He was in his car. And another car started to back out, and he started slamming on the horn because somebody flew down the aisle at like 30, 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And he goes, if I wouldn't have done that and they wouldn't have stopped, he goes, they would have died. He goes, it would have been a straight on T-bone.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just saved somebody's life.
That's wild.
And that's what I said. And I said, this is all in the recording. So I'm like, what? Maybe one day I'll release that. That'll be fun.
You should.
But Mike told me, he goes, when you're in the gym, if your coach yells at you, your coach needs to yell at you during a fight. Yeah. If he talks to you softly at the gym, he needs to talk to you the same way.
Yeah.
And he goes, when I'm in that cage, I don't hear anything. I hear my feet. I hear the whoosh of me throwing a punch or, getting hit with a punch. He goes, I didn't hear anything. And I never understood fully what that meant, like how you could do that until I watched a fight without fans.
Yeah.
And you see, I got it, coach. Yeah. And then you see your opponent go, yeah, that's not going to work with me, talking to your coach. It changed everything. It changed how coaches have to coach their fighters. It changed how careful they have to be because you can't just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
James Krause, he'll yell stuff and you're like, did he just say chicken noodle soup? Like something ridiculous.
Yeah. Krause and Mark Montoya both have a lot of it's almost like baseball. Instead of signs, it's codes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you imagine fighting and your coach is just going?
That would be great.
Well, and baseball really set the standard for that. Football, you've got headsets, you've got things to cover. Baseball, you had to come up with, again, the catchers, the simplest of hand signals. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Do this, do that. And once the other team figured it out, then you had to change it. Mm-hmm. So MMA has really adapted, and I hope you're seeing all the events start out with fans now. I'm hoping it stays safe.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I still think, I don't want to go down a COVID rabbit hole, but it's early. In the big scheme of things, man, this is early.
It is, but I'll never forget being in Orlando.
Yeah.
For a UFC fight night, it was Dos Anjos and Cerrone 2, I believe.
Okay.
And I saw somebody like 3 rows down that I knew. So I started talking to them, and the dudes behind me got in a fight, like straight up fist fight. And the other dude hits him with a right, and he falls where I would have been sitting, head first down. And I just went, like, that could have been me. But at the same time, I'm like, I miss that. I miss that chaos.
Yeah.
So And we were talking about it before to shift the gears completely. Like, obviously, the NHL going on right now, me being in Tampa, you being in Colorado, there are some huge implications. So, in your mind, even if you're not a hockey fan, what are the odds you see Tampa and Colorado in the Stanley Cup?
I'd be dope. It'd be dope. You know, like I said, I got friends from down there. Shout out to my buddy Rick. He's a big Tampa fan. So yeah, my brother played hockey. Like, I like the sport of hockey. I just am not. It's hard for me to get emotionally invested in it, but I respect and enjoy the sport. My brother played. He was a captain of his high school team. Shout out to my brother Gerald.
Well, I think MMA ruins you for other sports, and I'm a perfect example of that. Once I started liking MMA, it's MMA or hockey. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll watch soccer just because I admire the athleticism of running for 45 minutes at a time,
right,
over that field, and you're just none of them ever look tired.
Yeah.
Ever. But MMA ruins you. You watch football and you're like, it's not the same. It's not. And of course, I was a diehard Raiders fan for the longest time. So I was not a Tom Brady fan, and I'm still not a Bucs fan. But seeing him come to Tampa, I was like, okay, I guess I'll root for him this year.
Yeah. Worked out for y'all.
It did. Well, on that note, man, thank you so much for coming on. There's so much more I want to talk about, and we definitely have to bring you back on because you mentioned something about being a dad, and that could probably be a whole nother hour of just what that's like. And I love talking to fighters who are dads because you have a different mindset where you're super protective, but you also have a different mindset on how to raise a child.
Yeah.
So we will talk about it. How old's your son now? Like,
my daughter will be 7 in July. My son is 4.
Oh my God. Dude, time has flown because I know the son was the most recent. I know the last time we talked, I don't even think your daughter was born. So as far as like interview wise, so
yeah,
that's crazy. So
time flies.
Listen, man, one last time to plug the business. If there's anybody out there who needs your services or can reach out, please tell them where to find you.
Appreciate it. So anyone who's watching this very much knows me as the Predator, the professional Predator, but I'm on Instagram. I'm on at Braj the Human. Why? Like I said earlier, just a regular person who used to fist fight strangers for money. But anyway, Braj the Human on Instagram, Braj the Predator on Twitter. I am working for 2 different agencies right now. Cactus Marketing Communications based in Denver, and then Mr. Media, who makes brands look good, another agency here in Denver. And then I'm still doing my own thing. The agency that I've had for the last couple of years has been called FLG. Going to be really rebranding and doing some different things. Going to be changing that to Reciprocity Creative Collective, which I'm excited about. Really want to
using that master's degree, man.
Trying. Just want to build, tell stories, build brands, and help people. I always say, if I'm not the guy, I know the guy, and or the girl, So if I can reach out, if I can help somebody, whether it's wanting to build a brand, web, graphic design, photo, video services, or just chopping it up, please reach out. Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just know, I'm not just saying this because I've known you, but you're one of the most approachable people I've ever met, especially in the fight game. If you guys have questions, if you just want to ask him something, reach out to him. Because even if it's something he can help you with, like he said, if he's not the guy, he'll know the guy. And I have to thank you for that. And, one of the moments that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And, I categorize those meetings with fighters, but meeting you in that, Cleveland bar, ass to elbows with so many people watching. I think it was the Browns game.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm from Florida. I don't understand why you guys are all excited about a Browns game. But just being in that moment and the hospitality you showed and the kind of person you are carries into your business. So I really do appreciate that. So I'll take a moment on my end. I try to do this every time and I mess it up every time. So Barba Cubano keeps my beard looking nice and fresh.
Nice.
Shout out to Aaron. I've known him for years and I love what he's doing. And I don't advertise anything that I don't support. So that's awesome. the kind of philosophy you carry with you, that you believe in the product that you have, or that you're representing. So then I have Bertsos Bakeshop. Stephanie and I went to high school together. Didn't talk to her for like a decade. This came up, ran in, and I was like, this is amazing. So if you're ever in Florida, some of the most amazing decadent desserts you'll ever have in your life, I promise you. And then we've got Fat Boy Jiu-Jitsu. I just love Fat Boy Jiu-Jitsu because I'm a heavyweight, and
I like it.
And I will save the best for last, and I say the best for last. So one of my good friends is actually into forging knives and kind of building his brand there. So Tim Makes Knives on Instagram.
Tim Makes Knives, that's his handle. That's great.
Tim Makes Knives. I'm going to make sure that's right before I say it wrong, because that'll be the day that I say it. Yeah. But what we are going to do is we are going to make he's going to make a specific blade named after me that one of our viewers or one of our guests will get the opportunity to have. So nice. I'm really excited about that partnership because for me, I'm all about driving your passion. Like you said, you're doing all these things after MMA when so many guys could be at a boring 9-to-5 and not doing what they're passionate about. I fully respect what you do, and I've loved watching you because you have gone from Brian the fighter to Brian the advertising guy, and I don't think you've lost any of what you had before. You're still the professional. You might not be the predator anymore, but I don't think that you've lost any step in that. So, Dave Feldman, if you're listening, Alexander Slemenko, Brian Rogers, Russia BKFC. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Let's do it.
So on behalf of myself, Combat Press, Epic Jits Tees for making my shirt, Brian, thank you, man. Like, this was an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Appreciate it. It's funny. I was thinking about that weekend. We saw each other when I was in Tampa, going back to 2016 when Stipe beat Verdun. I was in town that weekend for my buddy's bachelor party, and you came.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, downtown Tampa. I remember running into you. There was a lot of beer that night. Listen, one night we're going to have to talk about what happened after Stipe beat Overeem in Cleveland.
Yeah.
People had to tell me what happened.
Yeah.
That's always a good night. So I just remember sitting, I was 7 rows from the cage, and I said, you know what? I need to start filming. Yeah. I don't know what told me to do that. And it was right when Stipe hit the punch and hit him on the ground and knocked him out. Yeah. And I just remember being like, this is the coolest thing in the world. And seeing how Cleveland reacted to an MMA fighter was beyond me because they had no idea about the sport.
Right.
Cab drivers, the restaurants, nobody knew why MMA was important, but they were like, hey, this guy from Cleveland's fighting, so we need to watch him.
Yeah, we're in. Yep.
So it really has that impact, and I love Cleveland. I went back in 2018, and I want to go back probably next year because some of the best breweries I've found. Shout out to Noble Beast and Masthead Brewing. If you guys ever watch this, I don't know why they would, but I appreciate all the time, man, and definitely thank you again.
No problem, man. Thank you, man. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for being patient with my schedule. Please send me a copy. I'd love to get this content out through my channels as well. And yeah.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you so much and stay tuned.